We found a trail of stones that pulsed with faint light. Lila said it softly, as if the forest might hear her and take offense. We stopped without meaning to. The woods had already been wrong for hours. Too still, too thick, the air holding on to sound instead of letting it travel. But the stones made that wrongness visible. They cut through the undergrowth in a narrow, deliberate line, each one half-buried, smooth as river rock. Their light wasn't steady. It swelled and faded in uneven breaths, like something struggling to regulate itself. Jonah exhaled. Bioluminescence, he said, though he didn't sound convinced. Fungus, maybe? Fungus doesn't do that, Lila replied. She was right. The light wasn't just dimming and brightening. It hesitated, stuttered, skipped a beat before catching up again. No two stones pulsed exactly alike, but sometimes they would align for a second, all of them glowing together. In those moments, the forest seemed to thin, as if a layer had been peeled away. I crouched and reached toward one. Don't, Lila said. My fingers brushed it anyway. The light inside sharpened instantly, focusing into a depth that shouldn't have existed. For a split second, I had the vertiginous impression of looking down a long, narrowing corridor, something receding from me at impossible speed. Then it collapsed back into the dull, milky glow. I pulled my hand away. It's not cold, I said. It should have been. The ground was damp and chilled, the air thin enough that our breath ghosted faintly in front of us. But the stone felt neutral, as if temperature didn't apply. Jonah shifted his weight. It's a path. It's pretending to be one, Lila said. Behind us, the forest had already rearranged itself too many times to trust. Landmarks slid out of place. Trees leaned in unfamiliar directions. The map in my pocket had become a suggestion rather than a guide. So we followed the stones. The deeper we went, the more the forest pressed inward. Trunks twisted subtly, their bark ridged in patterns that made your eyes want to follow them. Moss gathered in thick, velvety sheets that swallowed our footsteps. Where it didn't grow, the ground was packed hard, slick and worn, as if something had passed over it repeatedly. The stones continued their uneven pulse. After a while, I realized they weren't random. Each one had its own rhythm, but they drifted toward each other, sinking briefly before slipping apart again. Those moments of unison made the air feel thinner, stretched. Do you hear that? Jonah asked. We stopped. First, there was nothing. Then something emerged, not quite a sound, but the suggestion of one. It hovered at the edge of hearing, irregular and directionless. It's not a noise, Lila said. It's like something trying to be one. We kept moving. Time loosened its grip. My watch said minutes had passed, but my body insisted on hours. The light overhead never changed, yet it felt heavier, pressing down through the canopy in a dull, gray weight. Cold came in pockets, sudden, precise drops that tightened the skin. Each time, the stones brightened. Stop, Lila said. The trail had split. 3 lines of stones branched off, each pulsing faintly, each leading into a different density of trees. I knew, with a certainty that made no sense, that they hadn't been there a moment before. Jonah stared at them. We missed it. We didn't, Lila said. The leftmost path brightened slightly, its rhythm sharpening, more insistent than the others. Left, Jonah said. Why? He hesitated. Because it wants us to. We followed. The forest changed in increments. Branches tangled overhead, strangling the light into thin strands. The ground sloped without clear direction, distances stretching and compressing unpredictably. Walking felt resistant, like moving through something thicker than air. The almost sound grew stronger, not louder, but closer. Beneath it, a pattern formed. A slow, deep rhythm that pressed against the inside of my chest. Heartbeat, Jonah murmured. Lila didn't respond. We found the first shape just off the trail. It resembled a person in the loosest sense. Upright, vaguely symmetrical, but it didn't hold together. It flickered, its form jumping between misaligned positions, like frames dropped from a damaged recording. Don't go near it, Lila said. Jonah froze. The figure didn't react. It simply existed in fragments, shifting without moving. Each time the stones aligned, its shape clarified for a fraction of a second, arms resolving, a head tilting into something almost deliberate. Then it broke apart again. "What is it?" Jonah whispered. No one answered, because the feeling had changed. It wasn't just that we were being watched. It was that something was trying to understand how to look at us. We stepped off the path. The cold hit instantly. The stones dimmed, their rhythm faltering. The figure unraveled further, collapsing into disconnected pieces. "Stay on the trail," Jonah said. "You think that helps?" Lila asked. "I think it matters." We stepped back onto the stones. The figure stabilized. It didn't follow, but as we passed, something in its alignment shifted, as if it had adjusted its perspective to keep us within reach. There were more, some close, some deeper between the trees, all incomplete, some bent in unnatural ways, others stretched thin, their proportions sliding out of coherence. None approached. They didn't need to. The path guided us. The stones grew brighter, their synchronization lasting longer. The deeper silence pressed harder each time they aligned, stripping away even the almost sound. Details emerged in the figures, suggestions of faces, of hands. Not random, repeating. "They're iterations," Lila said, her voice tight. "They're trying something over and over." We reached the end. The trees fell back into a rough circle, but it wasn't a clearing. The air pooled thickly in the center, the gray light collecting like stagnant water. The stones formed a perfect ring. Their pulse was steady now, fully synchronized with the deep, internal rhythm that had followed us. At the center, the ground dipped. Something stood there. It held together more than the others, though not completely. Its proportions shifted subtly, continuously, as if being adjusted. Its surface was layered, overlapping impressions that never fully aligned. His face changed without moving. Each pulse altered the angle, the perspective, as though it were being viewed from different positions at once. "Don't go in," Lila said. Jonah stepped over the ring. The pulse stopped. The silence deepened until it felt structural, as if it were holding the space in place. Jonah stood in the basin, staring. He began, then stopped. The figure's face settled into a single alignment. It was looking at him, complete. I understood then. The flickering shapes weren't separate. They were attempts, and this was the closest result. Jonah stepped forward. "Wait," Lila said. He reached out. The instant he touched it, the pulse slammed back. The stones flared in blinding unison. The heartbeat surged into my chest. No longer distant but internal, overwhelming. Jonah gasped, his outline fractured. Not physically, something deeper. His form split into overlapping positions, misaligned versions of himself occupying the same space. The figure shifted in response. Or correction. Lila grabbed me. "Run." We did. The light surged behind us in violent cycles. The rhythm pounded, relentless. I looked back once. The basin was filled with forms. Not bodies, versions. Jonah stood at the center, flickering now, incomplete. Around him, the others gathered, aligning and misaligning, feeding into the same unstable shape. The forest closed behind us. The stones faded, their rhythm breaking apart into that uneven, struggling pulse. We never found that trail again. But sometimes, when the woods go too quiet, I see a single stone half buried in the ground. Its light pulses faintly. If I stare too long, it sharpens, deepens, and I feel something adjusting, trying to place me correctly. A low chant drifted through the trees, but every voice was whispering our names. We stopped at the same time, as if the sound had caught us by the spine. The forest had been dense but ordinary until then. Thick trunks, a high canopy that strained the daylight into a dim green wash, the constant hush of wind threading through needles. It had weight but not intent. The chant introduced intent. "Did you hear that?" Lila asked, too quietly, as if speaking louder might draw it closer. Evan didn't answer. He tilted his head, eyes unfocused, trying to locate direction. That was the first wrong thing. There was none. The sound didn't come from ahead or behind. It was simply there, suspended among the trees like a low fog. We listened. At first it was barely language, more a braided murmur, strands of whisper slipping over each other. Then, slowly, shapes formed within it, syllables stretching, collapsing, repeating. And threaded through all of it, unmistakable, our names, not called, not shouted, recognized. A cold pressure gathered at the base of my skull. I exhaled and saw my breath bloom pale in the air. Shouldn't have been that cold. That's not. Evan began, then stopped. His voice sounded wrong, flattened, like the forest had absorbed its edges. We need to go back, I said. I turned, expecting the narrow path we'd followed in, flattened ferns, a slight depression in the soil. There was nothing. The ground ran unbroken in every direction, roots coiling over each other, moss swelling thick between them. No trace of disturbance, no memory of passage. That's where we came from, Lila said, pointing past me. I followed her hand. The direction felt incorrect immediately, like trying to recall a dream that shifted under scrutiny. No, Evan said. We. The chant slipped closer. Lila flinched. Stop. Just listen. We did. The voices had multiplied. They overlapped in uneven rhythms, some high and breath-thin, others low and frayed. None were familiar, yet each carried a strange intimacy, as if they had been shaped from something we'd said once and forgotten. My name passed through them again. This time it came from my left, distinct for a fraction of a second. I turned sharply. Hello! Nothing answered. The trees stood close, their bark dark with moisture, surfaces catching faint light in slick patches. The air smelled of wet soil and something faintly sweet, like rot that had gone soft. It's the wind, Evan said, but his voice lacked conviction. It's carrying sound, echoing. In circles, Lila asked. He didn't respond. The forest shifted. Not dramatically, not enough to point to, but the spacing between trees altered, subtly, continuously. When I tried to fix on a particular trunk, a pale scar, a broken branch, it seemed to move a fraction each time I looked back. We're not staying here, Lila said. Pick a direction. Evan gestured ahead. There. We started walking. The ground was uneven, soft in places where decay had hollowed it out. Branches brushed against us, leaving damp streaks on our skin. The temperature dropped further, a creeping cold that settled into joints and lingered. The chanting moved with us. It didn't grow louder. It didn't fade. It remained fixed, as if distance no longer applied. Do you hear what they're saying? Lila whispered. I don't want to, Evan said, but I listened anyway. Fragments surfaced between the overlapping voices. Here, come, closer, and always our names. After a while, something changed. The pattern tightened. The pauses shortened. Words aligned more often, forming something like intention. You came. You came. You came. Evan stopped abruptly. No. Ahead of us, carved into a trunk at chest height, was a fresh line. I didn't. He stepped forward, touching it. The bark gave slightly under his fingers, too soft. We haven't passed this tree, Lila said. We must have looped. We didn't turn. The chant pressed closer. You came. You came. We turned and walked in a new direction. The forest rearranged itself. It was gradual but undeniable. Trees leaned at shallow angles, closing gaps, opening others. The ground sloped where it hadn't before. Light shifted in narrow bands, never brightening, only redistributing. The carved tree appeared again. The line was deeper. Evan swore under his breath. That's not possible. Mark another one, I said. He hesitated, then drew his knife and cut into a different trunk. The blade slid through with disturbing ease, like slicing into something layered but not rigid. We moved. The chant thickened, voices drawing closer to a shared rhythm. The second tree appeared. Both marks visible. The first had changed. The line was no longer a line. It had widened, branching slightly, resembling fingers pressed outward from beneath the bark. Evan stepped back. I didn't do that. Lila wrapped her arms around herself. It's learning. The chant stopped. The silence struck like pressure dropping. Then, all at once, the voices aligned. Our names, spoken in perfect unison. The sound filled everything, leaving no space for thought. The ground shifted beneath us. Not a tremor, but a settling, as if something vast had adjusted its weight. The trees leaned closer. Up close, the bark was wrong. It wasn't rough in the way bark should be. It was segmented, ridged in patterns that suggested growth but not of any tree I knew. Moisture gathered on its surface in thin, reflective layers. Shapes pressed outward, not fully formed, just suggestions. The curve of a brow, the hollow of an eye, a mouth that didn't open but implied the possibility. They're watching, Lila whispered. The word echoed through the chant. Watching. Evan grabbed my arm. We run. We did. Branches snapped against us. Roots caught our feet. The forest resisted, narrowing paths, forcing us to twist and turn. The air thickened, colder, harder to pull into our lungs. The chant resumed, altered now. Fragments of our own voices surfaced within it. Pick a direction. We're not staying here. We came from. Each phrase distorted, stretched thin. I lost track of time. Distance collapsed into repetition. Every direction felt identical, every step folding back into the last. Lila fell. She went down hard, catching herself with both hands. She didn't try to stand. Lila, I said, turning back. She was staring at the ground, fingers sunk into the moss. They're saying it wrong, she whispered. What? My name. The chant swelled. I listened past the noise. They were saying it, over and over, but each time it shifted slightly. An extra syllable, a misplaced stress, a sound held too long. Close. Wrong. Get up, Evan said. We have to move. Lila didn't respond. Her hands sank deeper. The moss parted around her fingers like something fluid, darkening as it closed. I grabbed her wrist. Her skin was cold, almost numb. Lila, you need to. She looked at me. Something was off. Not dramatically, just enough that my brain couldn't settle on her face. The proportions felt wrong, subtly rearranged. They almost have it, she said. The ground shifted. Her arm slipped in my grip, not pulled but accepted. The moss rose, folding over her hand, her wrist, moving upward in slow, deliberate layers. Evan lunged, grabbing her other arm. No! The chant tightened, voices aligning. Lila's name repeated, closer each time to something exact. She stopped struggling. Her expression softened, as if listening to something we couldn't hear. They're close, she said. The final repetition came. Perfect. She smiled. The moss surged, swallowing her in a single motion. It closed over her face as her name began again. Seamless. Correct. Then she was gone. The forest exhaled. The chant loosened, slipping back into overlapping whispers. Evan stared at the ground where she'd been. No. He drove the knife downward again and again. The earth yielded too easily, absorbing each strike without resistance. They learned her, he said. The chant shifted. 2 names now. Clear. Evan. Mine. The trees leaned closer. The shapes beneath the bark pressed outward, features sharpening, almost breaking through. They're going to learn us, Evan said. The moss stirred at his feet. He stepped back. Too late. It accepted his heel, then his ankle. No, he said, panic cracking through. He reached for me. I grabbed his arm. For a moment there was resistance. Then something beneath the surface shifted, and he slipped from my grip as if he'd never been solid. His name rang out perfect. He vanished beneath the closing moss. The forest settled again. The chant thinned. 1 name remained. Mine. It moved through the trees, repeating, adjusting, refining, each attempt closer than the last. I stood alone, the cold pressing inward, the watching shapes just beneath the bark. My breath clouded the air, the moss at my feet stirred, and beneath the layered whispers, I heard another voice join them, quiet, patient, my own, repeating my name back to them, correcting it,